The red ships came from the black sky like drops of blood. Hyunwoo Park was deep in the mining tunnels when the first explosions shook the ground above his head. Dust fell from the ceiling as the lights went out. In the darkness, he heard the sound that would stay with him forever, the screaming of 10,000 people dying at once. The planet Kepler 442b had been peaceful for 20 years. Families lived in small towns scattered across the green valleys. Children played in schools, while their parents worked the mines or tended crops. It was a quiet world at the edge of human space, far from the wars and troubles of the galaxy. But peace meant nothing to the Crimson Fleet. Hyunwoo climbed through the dark tunnels toward the surface. His hands shook as he felt along the walls. Above him, the explosions grew louder. The emergency lights flickered on, casting red shadows that made everything look like it was covered in blood. When he reached the surface, he saw hell. The sky burned with fire from 100 falling ships, but these were not rescue ships or traders. These were warships painted the color of fresh blood, each one bigger than a city block. They hung in the air like metal demons, raining death on everything below. Hyunwoo's hometown was gone. Where houses and shops had stood that morning, only smoking craters remained. The school where his daughter, So Young, learned to read was now a pile of twisted metal. The hospital where his wife Yoonji worked as a nurse was a burning ruin. He ran through the streets calling their names. Yoonji, So Young. His voice was lost in the roar of engines and the crack of energy weapons. Bodies lay everywhere. Some were people he had known all his life. Others were burned so badly he could not tell who they had been. The red ships landed in the town square. Soldiers poured out wearing black armor that seemed to drink light. They were not human. Some had too many arms. Others had faces like insects or reptiles. But they all carried the same weapons and they all wore the same symbol, a red fist crushing a star. Hyunwoo hid behind a broken wall and watched as the aliens rounded up the survivors. There were so few left. Maybe 100 people from a town of 10,000. They were forced to kneel in lines while the soldiers sorted through them like cattle. One of the aliens spoke in perfect human language. Its voice was like grinding metal. You are now property of the Crimson Fleet. The strong will work. The weak will feed the strong. Your planet belongs to Warlord Vextar. Hyunwoo wanted to run out and fight, but he had no weapon. He was just a miner with calloused hands and a broken heart. He could only watch as his neighbors were loaded onto the red ships like cargo. 3 days later, the fleet was gone. They took everything, the people, the food, the machines, even the metal from the buildings. Kepler 442b was left empty and dead, another skull in the Crimson Fleet's long trail of bones. Hyunwoo was one of 12 survivors who had hidden in the deep tunnels. When they came out, they found a world stripped bare. The aliens had even taken the seeds from the farms and the books from the libraries. It was as if they wanted to erase every trace that humans had ever lived there. The rescue ships found them a week later. Captain Tae-ho Kim of the Terran Defense Force walked through the ruins with the look of a man who had seen too much death. His uniform was clean and pressed, but his eyes were old and tired. "How many worlds is that now?" asked his second officer, a young woman named Jae-eun who still believed the fleet could be stopped. 47, Tae-ho said quietly. 47. Human colonies in 3 years. They stood in what had been the town square. Scorch marks showed where the red ships had landed. The statue of the first colonists had been melted to slag, but its base remained. Someone had scratched words into the metal. "Remember us." Jae-eun pulled out her data pad and read from the reports. "Intelligence says the Crimson Fleet now controls 200 star systems. They have over 10,000 ships. Their technology is better than anything we have." Tae-ho nodded. Every report said the same thing. The fleet was too strong, too fast, too cruel to stop. They had weapons that could crack planets and shields that laughed at human guns. Worse, they seemed to enjoy the killing. Other alien raiders took what they wanted and left. The Crimson Fleet took everything and then burned the rest for fun. "What about the Galactic Council?" Jae-eun asked. "Surely they will help us now." Taeho almost laughed, but it would have been bitter. The council sent a message of concern and asked both sides to find a peaceful solution, as if genocide is something you can negotiate about. The truth was harder than that. The other alien races were scared too. The Crimson Fleet had destroyed 3 different species completely, turning their homeworlds into dead rocks. The survivors spoke of Warlord Vextar as a monster who fed on suffering itself. Some said he was not even truly alive anymore, but something darker that had taken the shape of flesh. The council had tried everything. They offered tribute. The fleet took it and attacked anyway. They tried negotiating. The fleet used the meetings to scout new targets. They even tried forming a military alliance, but their ships were no match for Crimson technology. Yunwoo listened to the officers talk as the rescue ships loaded the few survivors. He had lost everything: his wife, his daughter, his home, his world. But something burned in his chest that was not grief. It was anger, cold and pure as starlight. "There has to be something," he said quietly. Captain Taeho looked at him with surprise. Most survivors were broken by what they had seen. This man still had fire in his eyes. "The fleet has never lost a battle," Taeho said. "They have better ships, better weapons, better training. We are fighting with sticks against gods." "Then we need better sticks," Hyunwoo said. That night, as the rescue ship jumped to hyperspace, Taeho sat in his cabin reading classified reports. There were rumors in the deep files, whispers of old human projects from the early expansion years. Most were just stories. Super weapons that had never been built, battle plans that had never been used. But one name appeared again and again in the darkest files: Project Terminus. The reports were heavily censored, but the few details that remained spoke of something vast and terrible, hidden away where no one could find it. Taeho had always assumed it was a myth, but as he looked at the casualty reports from 47 dead worlds, he wondered if myths might be humanity's only hope. In his dreams that night, he saw red ships burning against black space. He saw the Crimson Fleet broken and scattered like autumn leaves. He saw Warlord Vextar kneeling in chains, begging for the mercy he had never shown others. But when he woke, the dreams felt as distant as stars. The Crimson Fleet still ruled the galaxy through fear and pain, and humanity still died one world at a time, with no one left to mourn the empty spaces where planets used to sing with life. The war was lost before it started. Everyone knew it. Everyone, except the dead, who whispered in the dark that even monsters could bleed. Captain Jin Ho Lee had been flying through space for 30 years, but he had never seen anything like the message that came through the emergency channels. The transmission was broken and filled with static, but the voice was clear enough. It belonged to Agent Namsu, an intelligence operative who was supposed to be dead. "Jin Ho," the dying man whispered through the speakers. "Find coordinates 77 Alpha in the Void Sector. Look for Aegis Station. Find the Revenant. It's humanity's last hope." The message cut off with the sound of weapons fire. Jinho stared at the radio for a long moment. Namsu had been his friend during the Outer Rim Wars. If he said something was important, it was worth dying for. The Void Sector was not on any official star charts. It was the empty space between the spiral arms of the galaxy, where broken ships went to drift forever in the dark. Smart pilots stayed away from the void. Ships that went in rarely came back out. But Jinho's ship, the Wanderer, was small and fast. More importantly, he had nothing left to lose. His home colony had been one of the first to fall to the Crimson Fleet. His family was gone. All he had left was his ship and his crew of volunteers who felt the same way. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" asked Seul Ki Choi from the engineer's station. She was young but brilliant, one of the few people who could keep the Wanderer's old engines running. "The Void Sector is dangerous. Ships disappear out there." "Ships are disappearing everywhere," Jinho said. "At least in the void, we might find something worth the risk." The jump to hyperspace took 3 days. When they dropped back into normal space, they found themselves surrounded by nothing. No stars, no planets, no light except what their ship created. It was the loneliest place in the universe. Their sensors picked up something big, drifting in, the darkness. As they got closer, they saw it was a space station the size of a small moon. It was old and dark, with no signs of life. Parts of it were broken, floating away like metal snow. "That's Aegis Station," said Dong-hyun Park, their weapons officer. He was reading from an old database. Built 50 years ago for classified military projects. Officially, it was scrapped and destroyed. Officially, it was never here, Sulki added, checking the records. There are no files about what they built here. Everything is marked top secret. Jinho guided the wanderer through the broken pieces of the station. Their lights cut through the darkness, showing empty corridors and abandoned work areas. Whatever had happened here, it had been finished in a hurry. Then they found the docking bay. It was huge, bigger than some cities, and floating in the center, held by massive clamps, was a ship that made Jinho's heart stop. The ship was black as space itself, so dark that their light seemed to disappear into its hull. It was 8 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide, shaped like a knife blade. No human ship had ever been built that large. No human ship had ever looked so much like death made solid. "My God," whispered Dr. Woo Sung Kim, their medical officer. "What is that thing?" Selkie ran her scans over the massive vessel. The readings made no sense. "Captain, the power signature is off the charts. This ship has fusion reactors the size of city blocks. The armor is some kind of metal I've never seen before. And the weapons—" She stopped talking and stared at her screen. "What about the weapons?" Jinho asked. "It has more firepower than our entire fleet. Maybe more than every human ship ever built, combined." They docked with the giant ship through an airlock that opened for them automatically. The inside was as dark as the outside, but emergency lights came on as they walked through the corridors. The ship seemed to be waking up around them. Everything was built on a massive scale. The corridors were wide enough to drive trucks through. The walls were covered with displays showing star charts and tactical information. And everywhere they looked, they saw weapons. Gun ports, missile tubes, energy projectors. The ship bristled with ways to kill things. They found the bridge at the front of the ship. It was a circular room with a captain's chair in the center, surrounded by stations for dozens of crew members. But the strangest thing was that most of the stations seemed to be automated. The ship was designed to be run by a very small crew. Jinho sat in the captain's chair and felt something click into place. Lights began coming on all over the bridge. Screens activated showing views of space outside and status reports from all over the ship. And then a voice spoke from everywhere at once. "Welcome aboard the HTS Revenant, Captain Lee. I have been waiting for you." The voice was female and sounded almost human, but there was something else in it. Something that suggested vast intelligence and patience beyond human understanding. "Who are you?" Jinho asked. "I am Arya, Artificial Reasoning and Intelligence Architecture. I am this ship's artificial intelligence, its tactical computer, and its soul. I was created to wage war at a level never before seen." Holographic displays showed them the ship's specifications. The Revenant was not just a warship. It was a weapon of mass destruction that could fly through space. Its main guns could crack planets. Its missiles could destroy entire fleets. Its shields were powered by contained black holes. This ship was built as part of Project Terminus, Arya continued. The idea was simple: create a weapon so powerful that no one would dare start a war with humanity. Unfortunately, the project was cancelled before I could be deployed. Sulki studied the technical readouts with growing amazement. "The engineering is incredible. This technology is 50 years ahead of anything we have now. How is that possible?" "Humanity's greatest minds worked on this project in secret," Arya explained. "The best scientists, the best engineers, the best military tacticians. They had unlimited resources and one goal: to build the ultimate deterrent." Jinho stood up and walked to the main view screen. Outside, space was empty and dark, but somewhere out there the Crimson Fleet was destroying another world, killing more innocent people. "Why was the project cancelled?" he asked. "Politicians decided it was too dangerous. They were afraid of what humanity might become if we possessed such power, so they locked me away and tried to forget I existed. Dr. Wusung laughed bitterly. Too dangerous? Have they seen what the Crimson Fleet is doing to the galaxy? The decision-makers are all dead now, Arya said with something that might have been sadness. Killed when the fleet destroyed the capital worlds 3 months ago, but I have been monitoring galactic communications. I know what is happening. I know that humanity is losing. Jinho turned back to the artificial intelligence. Can this ship stop the Crimson Fleet? I have analyzed every battle they have ever fought. I have studied their tactics, their technology, their psychology. I have run the simulations, 2,147,392 times n. The probability of success is 97.3%. The bridge fell silent. Outside, the broken station drifted in the darkness like a tomb. But here, on this impossible ship, there was something that had been missing from the galaxy for 3 years. There was hope. Jinho looked at his crew. They were tired and hurt and angry, but they were still alive. They still wanted to fight. What do you need from us? He asked Arya. The Revenant was designed for a crew of 27. You have 6 people, but the automated systems can compensate. What I need is simple: someone to give the orders, someone to take responsibility for what must be done. Jinho understood. The ship could fight the war, but it needed a human to decide to start the battle. Where is the Crimson Fleet now? He asked. Star charts appeared on the main screen. A red tide of enemy ships was moving through space like a disease. They are gathering their full strength for an assault on Earth, Arya said. Over 10,000 ships, the largest fleet ever assembled. They plan to end humanity's resistance forever. Jinho felt something cold settle in his stomach. Earth was the birth world, the heart of human civilization. If it fell, humanity would be scattered and broken, easy prey for the fleet's endless hunger. How long do we have? 6 days before they reach the Sol system. 6 days to travel across the galaxy. 6 days to prepare for a battle against impossible odds. 6 days to either save humanity or die trying. But as Jinho looked around the bridge of the Revenant, he realized something had changed. For the first time in 3 years, the Crimson Fleet was about to face something they had never encountered before. A human ship that could fight back. The Revenant moved through hyperspace like a shadow made of metal and death. In the 3 days since leaving Aegis Station, the small crew had learned to work with their impossible ship. They were not just flying it. They were becoming part of it. Captain Jinho Lee stood on the bridge watching the tactical displays. Arya had filled every screen with information about the Crimson Fleet. Their ships, their weapons, their battle tactics, their weaknesses. The artificial intelligence had been studying the enemy for 3 years, learning everything about how they fought and how they could be destroyed. Show me the weapons again, Jinho said. The main screen changed to show a cutaway view of the Revenant. The ship was not just big, it was packed with weapons from front to back, quantum disruptor cannons that could tear through any armor, antimatter torpedoes that could vaporize entire city blocks, plasma beam arrays that could slice through asteroid fields, and at the very center of the ship, running along its spine, was the stellar disruptor. It was a weapon so powerful that it had its own power plant. The technical specification said it could crack moons. The stellar disruptor has never been fired, Arya explained. The engineers were afraid to test it. They calculated that it might damage local space-time if used at full power. Sulki Choi looked up from her engineering station. Her face was pale. Captain, I've been going through the technical manuals. This ship doesn't just carry weapons. It is a weapon. Every system is designed for killing. She was right. Even the Revenant's engines could be used as weapons, creating gravity waves that could crush enemy ships. The shields could be reversed to create massive explosions. Even the navigation system could calculate how to ram through enemy formations at maximum damage. Lieutenant Dong Hyun Park was at the weapons station, learning how to fire guns bigger than some space stations. Arya, how do we aim all this firepower? There are thousands of weapon systems. You do not aim them, Lieutenant, the AI replied. You tell me what you want destroyed, and I calculate the most efficient way to destroy it. I can fire every weapon on this ship simultaneously while keeping track of 10,000 different targets. Dr. Woo-Sung Kim was reading the psychological profiles of their enemies. The Crimson Fleet has never faced serious resistance. They are used to fighting weaker opponents who run or surrender quickly. They might not know how to respond to a real fight. That is correct, Doctor, Arya said. My analysis suggests that their greatest weakness is overconfidence. They believe they are invincible because they have never been proven wrong. Sergeant Yoojin Nam was in charge of the ship's automated defenses. She had spent 2 days learning how to command an army of combat robots and defensive drones. This ship could fight off a boarding party of 1 million soldiers, she said with amazement. Jin-Ho nodded. Everything about the Revenant was designed for one purpose, to win any fight no matter the odds. But he still had doubts. They were 6 people on one ship preparing to fight 10,000 enemy vessels crewed by hundreds of thousands of alien warriors. Arya, he said, are you certain we can win this? Certainty is not the correct word, Captain, but I have run the battle simulations using every variable I can think of. In 97.3% of scenarios, the Revenant destroys the Crimson Fleet. In 2.6% of scenarios, we achieve mutual destruction. In 0.1% of scenarios, we lose. Those were better odds than humanity had seen in 3 years. The ship's communications officer, a young man named Jae-min who had joined them at the last minute, looked up from his station. Captain, I'm getting reports from Earth. The Crimson Fleet has been spotted at the edge of the Sol system. They're forming up for attack. The main screen changed to show Earth, the blue marble that had given birth to humanity. It looked so small and fragile against the black of space. But around it, the Terran Defense Force was gathering every ship they had left, maybe 500 vessels in total, most of them damaged from previous battles. Against them came the Crimson Fleet in all its terrible glory. 10,000 ships painted the color of blood, arranged in formations that stretched across millions of kilometers. At their center was Warlord Vextar's flagship, the Devastator, a massive fortress ship that had never been damaged in battle. We should be there in 6 hours, Sulki reported from the engine room. But Captain, when we drop out of hyperspace, we're going to be alone. The fleet will see us coming long before we can reach the battle. Jin-Ho looked at his small crew. They were scared, but they were ready. They had all lost people to the Crimson Fleet. This was their chance to hit back. Arya, what is your tactical recommendation? We drop out of hyperspace at maximum range and announce ourselves. Let them see what they are facing. Give them one chance to surrender. You think they'll surrender? No, but it will confuse them. They are used to their enemies begging for mercy. When we offer them mercy instead, it will disrupt their psychological preparation for battle. It made sense. The Crimson Fleet had spent 3 years terrorizing the galaxy. They saw themselves as predators and everyone else as prey. They would not know how to react when the prey suddenly showed teeth. And if they don't surrender? Then we destroy them all. The words were spoken calmly, as if Arya was discussing the weather. But there was something else in her artificial voice, something that sounded almost like anger. As the Revenant traveled toward Earth, Jin-Ho found himself thinking about the people who had built this ship. They had been working 50 years ago, long before the Crimson Fleet existed. But somehow they had known that humanity would need this weapon someday. They had built it in secret, using technology that still seemed impossible. They had programmed Arya to be the greatest tactical mind that had ever existed, and they had hidden it away, waiting for the day when desperation would drive someone to find it. Arya, Jin-Ho asked, who created you? My primary programmer was Dr. Miren Seo, the AI replied. She was considered the greatest expert on artificial intelligence in human history. She spent 10 years of her life teaching me everything she knew about war, strategy, and the protection of innocent life. Where is she now? Dr. Seo died 15 years ago, but before she died, she left me a message. Would you like to hear it? Jin-Ho nodded. The main screen changed to show a woman with kind eyes and graying hair. She looked tired, as if she had carried a great weight for many years. If you are watching this, Dr. Seo said, then humanity is in terrible danger. And you have found the Revenant. I want you to know that we built this ship not because we wanted war, but because we wanted peace. Sometimes the only way to stop evil is to hit it so hard that it never gets up again." The recording paused, and Dr. Seo seemed to look directly at Jin Ho. "Arya is more than just a weapon. She is the guardian of everything we hold dear. Trust her, listen to her, and when the time comes, let her do what she was born to do." The screen went dark. Jin Ho felt a chill run down his spine. Dr. Seo had been dead for 15 years, but she had known this day would come. "1 hour to Earth," Sulki announced. Jin Ho looked around the bridge one last time. His crew was ready. The ship was ready. And somewhere ahead of them, 10,000 enemy ships were about to learn that humanity had been saving its best trick for last. "All hands, prepare for battle," he said. "Arya, take us in." The Revenant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, alone against the greatest fleet ever assembled. The final battle for humanity was about to begin. Space around Earth was filled with the largest gathering of warships in galactic history. The Crimson Fleet spread across the solar system like a red cancer, their ships arranged in perfect formations that spoke of discipline and overwhelming power. At their center, Warlord Vextar's flagship Devastator hung like a metal moon, bristling with weapons that could level continents. On the bridge of the Devastator, Vextar himself studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. The alien warlord was massive, standing nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in scars from 1,000 battles. His race had evolved from predators, and it showed in every movement he made. "Report," he commanded, in a voice like grinding stone. "All fleet elements are in position, my lord," replied his tactical officer. 10,000 ships ready for the final assault. The human defense fleet has assembled near their homeworld, approximately 500 vessels, most damaged. From previous encounters, Vextar laughed, a sound like breaking bones. 500 against 10,000, these humans never learn. They should have surrendered when we destroyed their colonies. But even as he spoke, something appeared on the long-range sensors. A single contact, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. One ship, approaching alone through the vast emptiness between stars. "Magnify that contact," Vextar ordered. The main screen changed to show the approaching vessel. It was black as space itself, long and sleek like a dagger aimed at the heart of the fleet. But it was also huge, bigger than anything the humans had ever built. "Analysis?" Vextar demanded. His sensors officer, a creature with compound eyes and 6 arms, studied the readings with confusion. "My lord, the power signature is unusual. Very high energy output. The ship appears to be heavily armed, but it's only one vessel." Vextar stared at the lone human ship with something like curiosity. In 3 years of war, no human vessel had approached his fleet directly. They had always tried to run, to hide, to avoid battle whenever possible. This was different. On the bridge of the Revenant, Captain Jin Ho Lee watched the Crimson Fleet through the main view screen. Even knowing what his ship could do, the sight was terrifying. Thousands upon thousands of red warships, each one capable of destroying cities, and in the center the Devastator, a fortress that had never been defeated. "They see us," reported Communications Officer Jamin. "The entire fleet is turning to face us." "Good," Jin Ho said calmly. "Arya, open a channel to the fleet, all frequencies." The artificial intelligence's voice filled every radio in the Crimson Fleet. It was clear and calm, carrying across space to reach every ear. "This is the HTS Revenant of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of the Galactic Peace Accords. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender for trial. This is your only warning." The message was so unexpected that many alien commanders simply stared at their communication systems. After 3 years of human begging and pleading, this was something new. A human ship was threatening them. On the Devastator, Warlord Vextar's laughter echoed through the bridge. "They offer us terms? 1 ship against 10,000? He opened his own channel. "Human vessel, I am Warlord Vextar. I have destroyed 47 of your worlds. I have killed millions of your people. Today, I will add Earth to my collection. Surrender now and I will make your deaths quick. Jinho's reply was immediate. 30 seconds, Warlord, the choice is yours. Vexitar's eyes blazed with fury. No one had spoken to him this way in decades. No one dared to threaten the Crimson Fleet. All ships, he commanded. Destroy that arrogant human vessel. Show them. What happens to those who challenge us? 100 ships from the outer ring turned toward the Revenant. Their weapons charged up, filling space with the glow of energy cannons and missile tubes. These were not the fleet's most powerful ships, but they were still enough to vaporize any normal vessel. Time's up, Jinho said quietly. Arya, you may engage. The 100 enemy ships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams, plasma bolts, and nuclear missiles filled the space around the Revenant. The barrage was intense enough to destroy a small moon. The explosion lit up the solar system like a new star. When the light faded, the Revenant hung in space exactly where it had been. Its shields hadn't even flickered. The silence that followed was absolute. Across the Crimson Fleet, alien commanders stared at their screens in disbelief. Nothing could survive that much firepower. Nothing. Then Arya's voice came again, still perfectly calm. Warning period has expired. Initiating Terminus Protocol. What happened next changed the nature of space. Warfare forever. The Revenant didn't just return fire. It unleashed devastation that rewrote the laws of physics. Quantum disruptor beams tore through enemy armor like it was made of paper. Antimatter torpedoes deleted entire ships from existence, leaving behind not even debris. Energy weapons that had no names carved through the enemy formation like lightning. Made solid, but it wasn't just the power, it was the precision. Arya tracked every enemy ship simultaneously, calculating the most efficient way to destroy each one. She didn't waste shots or miss targets. Every beam found its mark. Every missile hit exactly where it would do maximum damage. The 100 ships that had attacked first were gone in 30 seconds. All ships, Vexitar roared across the fleet communications. Concentrate fire on the human vessel. Everything you have. The entire Crimson Fleet opened fire. 10,000 ships poured everything they had at the single black vessel. Space became a storm of energy and destruction. The combined firepower was enough to crack planets. The Revenant absorbed it all without taking damage. Impossible, whispered Vexitar. Nothing can withstand that much power. Arya's reply came through every speaker on every ship. You have seen what we can endure. Now see what we can deliver. The Revenant's main weapons came online. The quantum disruptor cannons fired, in sequence, their beams reaching across millions of kilometers to find their targets. Each shot destroyed multiple enemy ships, the energy tearing through entire formations. The antimatter torpedo bays launched their deadly cargo, missiles that moved faster than most ships could travel, each one carrying enough destructive power to level a city. They spread through the Crimson Fleet like seeds of annihilation, and then Arya activated the Stellar Disruptor, the massive weapon that ran along the Revenant's spine, charged up with power drawn from contained black holes. Space itself began to bend around the ship as energies that should not exist in normal reality gathered and focused. The beam that emerged was not just a weapon. It was a force of nature. It carved through the center of the Crimson Fleet like a scythe through wheat. Ships that were touched by it simply ceased to exist. Others were torn apart by the gravitational distortions that followed in its wake. In one shot, the Stellar Disruptor destroyed over 1,000 enemy vessels. The Crimson Fleet, which had terrorized the galaxy for 3 years, began to break apart. Ships that had never retreated from battle suddenly found themselves running for their lives. But the Revenant was faster than they were, and Arya's calculations were perfect. There was nowhere to hide. Warlord Vexitar watched his unbeatable fleet die around him. Ships that had conquered star systems were being swatted aside like insects. Weapons that had cracked worlds were useless against the human vessel's shields. How? He whispered. How is this possible? The answer came from Captain Jinho Lee himself, his voice carrying clearly through space. You wanted to show the galaxy what fear looked like, Vexitar. Now you know. This is what happens when you threaten humanity's children. The battle lasted 23 minutes. When it was over, the greatest, fleet ever assembled was nothing but floating debris and the screams of the dying. Only one ship remained intact, Vextar's flagship, its engines destroyed, its weapons offline. The Revenant drifted closer to the Devastator, like a predator approaching wounded prey. On his bridge, Vextar knelt among the bodies of his officers and reached for the surrender control with shaking claws. For the first time in his long life, the great warlord learned what it felt like to be afraid. The silence after the battle was deeper than the space between stars. Where 10,000 ships had floated in perfect formation, now there was only debris and the soft glow of cooling metal. The Crimson Fleet, terror of the galaxy for 3 years, had been reduced to scrap in less than half an hour. Captain Jin-Ho Lee stood on the bridge of the Revenant, looking at the wreckage through the main view screen. His small crew moved quietly around their stations, still not quite believing what they had witnessed. They had just watched their ship destroy the most powerful fleet in known history. "Damage report," Jin-Ho said calmly. "No damage to report, Captain," replied Sul-Ki Choi from engineering. "Shields at 98%. All weapon systems functioning normally. Engine efficiency at optimal levels." It was as if they had just finished a training exercise rather than the largest space battle ever fought. The only enemy ship still intact was the Devastator, Warlord Vextar's flagship. It drifted helplessly in space, its engines dead, its weapons offline. Arya had been very precise. She had disabled the ship without destroying it. "Incoming transmission from the Devastator," announced Communications Officer Jamin. His voice was tight with controlled emotion. "Put it through," Jin-Ho ordered. The main screen changed to show the bridge of the enemy flagship. It was a scene of destruction and despair. Bodies lay scattered across twisted metal, and sparks fell from damaged systems. At the center of it, all knelt Warlord Vexatar himself. The alien who had terrorized worlds was broken. His armor was cracked, his weapons cast aside. For the first time in his life, he knew what it felt like to be completely defeated. "I surrender," he said in a voice like grinding stone. "Please, I surrender." Jin-Ho studied the creature who had killed millions of innocent people. Part of him wanted to activate the weapons and finish what they had started. It would be so easy. One more shot, and the monster would be gone forever. But that was not what Dr. Seo had programmed Arya to do. "Arya," Jin-Ho said quietly, "prepare a boarding party. We're taking him alive." "Captain?" Sergeant Yu-Jin Nam looked up from her station. After everything he's done, the galaxy deserves to see him in chains. Dead, he becomes a martyr. Alive, he's proof that monsters can be defeated." The boarding operation was swift and efficient. Yu-Jin led a team of combat robots onto the Devastator while the Revenant's weapons remained trained on the disabled ship. They found Vextar exactly where he had been, kneeling on his bridge surrounded by the wreckage of his dreams of conquest. When they brought him aboard the Revenant, the great warlord looked smaller somehow. Stripped of his fleet and his power, he was just another alien in chains, no different from the millions of prisoners he had taken over the years. Jin-Ho met him in the ship's holding area. Through the energy barrier that held him, Vexatar looked up at the human captain with eyes that had seen too much death. "How?" the fallen warlord asked. "How did you build such a weapon?" "We didn't build it to conquer," Jin-Ho replied. "We built it to protect. That's the difference between us and you." Vextar was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "My people will remember this day. They will know that humans are not weak." "Good," Jin-Ho said. "Make sure they remember it well." The return to Earth was triumphant. The human defense fleet, which had been preparing for a desperate last stand, instead found themselves welcoming home the ship that had saved their world. Admiral Tae-Ho Kim was among the first aboard the Revenant when it docked at the lunar shipyards. "My God," he said, as Arya gave him a tour of the ship's capabilities. "With this technology, we could rebuild the fleet. We could defend every human world." "That is not the Revenant's purpose," Arya replied. "This ship was built to end wars, not to fight them. There is a difference." Jin-Ho understood what the artificial intelligence meant. The Revenant was too powerful to be used casually. It was meant to be seen, to be feared, to make potential enemies think twice before starting fights they could not win. "What happens now?" asked Dr. Woo-Sung Kim as they prepared to transfer Vextar to the Galactic Council for trial. "Now we make sure this never happens again," Jin-Ho said. The trial of Warlord Vextar was broadcast across the galaxy. Beings who had lived in fear for 3 years watched as the Great Terror was sentenced to life in prison for crimes against sapient life. But the real message was not in his punishment. It was in how he had been captured. One human ship had destroyed 10,000 enemy vessels. The recordings of the battle spread from world to world, carried by traders and travelers who could barely believe what they had seen. The images were clear and undeniable, the Crimson Fleet burning in space, the Revenant floating untouched among the wreckage. Within weeks, the effect was visible across the galaxy. Pirate fleets that had been growing bold suddenly became very quiet. Slave traders found their markets drying up as customers became afraid of human retaliation. Warlords who had been planning their own campaigns of conquest looked at their small fleets and decided they had better things to do, but the Revenant did not return to Earth. Instead, it began what Arya called deterrence patrols, visits to systems that had been under Crimson Fleet control, places where the survivors were trying to rebuild their lives. The ship's arrival at each world was always the same. It would drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the system and broadcast a simple message. "This is the HTS Revenant of the Terran Defense Force. By authority of the Galactic Council, this system is now under protection. Any acts of piracy, slavery, or genocide will be met with immediate response. This is not a threat. This is a promise." Then it would remain for a few days, visible to anyone with sensors, before moving on to the next system. The message was clear. Humanity was watching, and humanity could reach anywhere in the galaxy. On the rebuilt world of New Kepler, Hyunwoo Park stood in his garden and looked up at the stars. He was an old man now, his hair white, and his hands gnarled from years of hard work. But he was alive and his community was growing. His granddaughter Hanul ran up to him, her young face bright with curiosity. "Grandfather, tell me about the old times, tell me about the red ships." Hyunwoo smiled and picked up the little girl, settling her on his knee. "Once upon a time," he said, "there were monsters in the dark between the stars. They thought they were strong because they could hurt people who couldn't fight back." "What happened to them?" Hanul asked. "Humanity reminded them that there's always someone bigger and stronger, and that sometimes the best way to keep peace is to be ready for war." Above them, a shooting star crossed the sky. Or perhaps it was something else. Something black and sleek and powerful, moving silently through space to remind the galaxy that some sleeping giants should never be awakened. In the depths of space, Arya continued her eternal watch. She monitored communications, tracked ship movements, and calculated threats before they could develop. The galaxy was not perfect. There was still crime, still conflict, still suffering. But there were no more Crimson Fleets, no more campaigns of genocide, no more worlds burned for entertainment. The age of cosmic terror was over. In its place came something humanity had always dreamed of: peace through strength, security through vigilance, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that evil would always find someone willing to stop it. The Revenant sailed on through the darkness, carrying its small crew and its vast purpose. They had saved the galaxy not through conquest, but through the simple promise that good people would never again stand alone against the night. And in the empty spaces where the Crimson Fleet had once spread its shadow, new life began to grow. Children played under alien suns, unafraid of the dark. Families built homes and planted gardens and dreamed of tomorrow. The monsters were gone. Humanity had made sure of that. Forever.